Hey everyone, you got a different dynamic duo going on today. So you got Constance, and I'm joined by Kyle.
Hello, everybody.
And today we are talking about the latest DC uh, EU film, or say DC film, The Flash, that has just opened. I'm dying to hear Kyle's thoughts because I could just see him about to burst off the screen there. Go ahead.
I'm also dying to hear your thoughts because we
Yes,
haven't discussed anything that
we
we
have
how we
not.
feel.
We
So
are doing this blind.
yeah.
So, overall
O-
thoughts.
Overall thoughts. I really enjoyed it. Uh, I think it's this movie has been on its way for such a long time. I think back even before um BVS Batman vs Superman. Um, I think right around when they were like casting everybody for that, which is where they introduced Ezra Miller for the first time. Everybody was kind of like, kind of scheduled to get their own solo films. So it's been since, what was that, like 2016?
When
Um,
first announced, because I feel like
yeah,
BBS
almost.
was announced back in like 2013 or something.
Yeah, no, you're right. So I think it came out around 2016, but yeah, I mean, it was announced and everything a lot sooner or a lot earlier than that. Um, so I feel like I've been waiting for this movie for a decade. So having said that, because of just like everything that's come out of it behind the scenes and everything, um, I will say that it kind of dampened my interest a little bit. I wasn't uh there's just so much behind the scenes that is like clouding this movie that I just feel like I'm like, okay, I just want to see it already. I just want to see what the big fuss is about, and I want to have my own opinion, and I just want to judge it solely based on the film itself. Um so again, based on the movie itself and nothing else, I really enjoyed it as a DC fan. Um as a DC fan, and yeah, I mean, I think, if you put aside every all the drama and all the nonsense, I think, in my opinion, I think this is really well made, and I think, it does a lot to honor a lot of the kind of previous DC projects that have come before it, not just in the past decade, but decades prior too. When it first started, when it all first began, on the silver screen and then on the big screen and everything. So, I have a lot more to say about it, but I think overall I really enjoyed it. I hesitate to say that I loved it for some reason, but I think I just need to see it again, because I am excited to see it again. So that's what
Okay,
I think.
good. So you've only seen it once so
I've
far,
only seen it once so
as
far.
of taping this. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my overall thoughts are different, but I was so sure. I was like, I'm going to go into this and I'm going to hate it. I did not. um, as I walked out, I was like, huh, I thought I was going to hate that. Now, I don't love it either. Um, but it didn't give me the feeling that like Shazam 2 did. I did not, I struggled with that movie. Um, but the funny thing is, and I'm trying to remember the last time this happened. Usually I love a movie until we get to act three. Like, let's take like Black Widow. I think that's a solid movie until we get to the Red Room. Then the movie falls apart. And I'm like, okay, now we have the act three silly williness. This is the complete opposite. That opening had me so scared. I was like, oh God, it's going to be terrible. But it got better as it went. And I actually think act three is much stronger in this movie than most superhero movies. Like where they fail, this one, rises above. And I'm like, when's the last time I thought Act One was the problem? I can't recall. I'm sure it's happened. I just can't think of it. So to me, it started off very rocky. But luckily, because it was a lot of movie and it was more was coming, it got better with time. So I'm not
Time.
unhappy. Yes. But I didn't love it, but I was really sure I was going to hate it, and I do not. So that's a nice surprise. Those are my overall
Right,
feelings.
right. And I think too, just because you know, when it started to get to the point where this was about to be released, there were so many like test screenings and I just feel like so many people saw it just so early in advance, and there were a lot of people that had like such good things to say about it. Tom Cruise for some reason, and Stephen King like praised this movie. Um, there's a couple other people. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I just think there was, you know, my expectations started to rise because of that. So but then I had to like kind of like, you know, reassess that and be like, okay, but you know, I feel like there's a reason that there people are publicly talking about it like this. So I'm like, okay, I don't want to fully expect to go in and see like this best movie I've ever seen, because I don't think first of all, after seeing it, I don't think that's true, and I didn't want to just be disappointed afterwards. So um, yeah, like I said, I think this is a really good. I like to think of it as like you know, as somebody who's read a lot of DC comics. I think um to me this was like watching, and I think it's interesting that you the way that you feel about the act one, because I really enjoyed it because it did feel so much like watching a comic book. um but I can see why, you know, that would turn some people off, but to me I loved it, and it felt very much like the movie overall. I think felt very much like an Elseworld story, like a really well told Elseworld story, which is like, I guess you can compare that to like Marvel's like What If, right? Where it's like an alternate version of events, but you're still using these same characters that everybody knows. So um yeah, and also too, I think it's interesting that they didn't make this like so much of an origin film, like
Right.
and I was thinking about that too, because like I said, you know, they introduced this character first in Batman versus Superman, which they also did with Wonder Woman. But she got her own like origin movie, but I think that's also because Wonder Woman's like origin story hasn't been well realized in film the way that the I guess the Flash has, because we've had the TV show, right? So I think this movie is also writing off of a lot of the familiarity that people have with that show. Uh, this is it's so weird because I think that like this movie can bring up like such complex conversations about this kinds of stuff, because there's so many like different versions of these characters that we know from different sorts of media. So yeah.
Right. I agree with that. I'm a huge fan of the TV show. I think Grant Gustin is a great Flash. The only thing I don't like about, well, there's two things I don't like about the TV show. Since everyone's making fun of the CGI in this movie, which I do have a problem with, but mostly because it's on a big screen. I think on your regular television screen, it's not going to be the disaster everyone wants it to be. I don't like it in the show either, but it's a TV show. It clearly has a CW budget, and also it falls into that trap that fell into of the villain of the week. Like even though they'll have an overarching like one whole season was about Zoom, great. That's a little tiring too. So it's like they almost didn't know how to space the arcs. But if you take
Right.
all that away and just look at what they do get right, they get a lot right. Um, so I agree with that assessment. And it does help that the TV show was like, hey, you probably saw that and then came to this. And I also don't think Barry's origin is as complicated. I feel like you really have to explain who Wonder Woman is. It's like, okay, she's not really a god, but she's not just a woman. Like you have to
Yeah.
explain what she is. Whereas, right, guy gets hit by lightning. Like they do an origin, but it's in a different way.
Right.
So
Right.
I like how they tackle that. That way you kind of get it, but not with the like oh, here we go, and here's the thing, and the thing happens, and then we have to have the montage of him figuring it out, and then he has to do all the different costume, blah blah blah. We can skip all that. I think we
Right.
evolved as a society. Like what worked for Raimi back in Spider-Man days, like 2002, we don't need all that. I think audiences are smarter overall, so you can do kind of do shorthand to get there faster. See what I did there? I
This
just
is
realized
gonna
that
be
as I
full of
said it. I was
puns.
like, hey. All right.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
you have
I
some
agree with,
specifics.
yeah, I agree. I think I was also going to bring that up. I think, with a character like Spider-Man, I mean, we've seen his origin. Same with Batman too. We've seen his origin so many
Oh
times.
yeah.
Um so yeah, like I agree with you. I'm glad that they are finally giving us a different story, because I think the general populace kind of already understands who these characters are and what gave them their powers and everything. So um yeah, where would you like to begin? Because
Well, it depends on how you want to break this down. Like, do you want to break down
yeah,
like, oh, here are elements I liked, or here are the elements I had issue with, or do you want to just talk about categories like, oh yeah, everyone's talking about CGI. We could talk about that, if
let's
you
talk
have
about the CGI.
okay, we can
Yeah,
do that. You want me to go first or
yeah, yeah.
okay. It was hard to look directly at the screen during the baby shower. Um, and I was like, okay, I think this is a choice. I like to think that enough people. I don't know how movies are made, but I think a lot of people have to okay it before it actually gets to us. So I'm like, multiple eyeballs saw this. They had to have been like, yep, mm-hmm. I'm like, this has got to be deliberate. But I'm like, why does it look so odd? And I was like, well, maybe it's because it's babies. Maybe because I'm a mom and I'm all like, oh, baby. Like, you don't like the thought of it. I'm like, I don't think they're really in danger. But they have to
Right.
suggest that they're in danger enough. Otherwise, where's the stakes? But I don't know. I thought it looked bad. And a lot of people were trying to explain that the director said that it's on purpose. But I'm
Mhm.
confused because I think in the interview he said, well, when we're in the Speed Force, I wanted that to be that way to show that we're in it. But that
Right.
doesn't explain why Batman's action scenes look so iffy. Like I don't like how Batman looks when he fights. Like the actual fighting's cool, but it feels very flat to me.
Which Batman are we talking about?
Oh, well, I don't remember Ben Affleck's scenes anymore, but I'm thinking of the it's not a silo, but the underground where
Yeah,
coming
in
down to
Russia.
rescue what they think is Clark.
Mhm.
Something about that, I was like, God, this should be cool. This should be like the warehouse, but it's not as good. Like look wise, like the movements, the choices of the choreography, that's all good. It's just how it's rendered. I'm like, something's not okay
Mm.
here. So I don't think it's exclusive to the Speed Force, as the someone quoting the director saying that's what it is. Now, either I read that wrong or that's something they're not speaking to. I don't know, but I had trouble looking right at it, personally.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think Andy Muschietti was talking more about like the Chrono Bowl, the little arena that he finds himself in when
Yeah,
he's going back in time. Um, which I understand, like they do kind of look like video game characters, sort of. Like they showed Henry Cavill from Justice League, and that was clearly like a digital version of him. So I can see that, because I understand his logic there, I guess, in terms of the Speed Force and how all of that works. So I can get behind that, I guess. Uh, that's interesting that you commented on the Batman fight scene, because I don't think I noticed, personally, I didn't know if I noticed anything visually off about that scene, but I will say, in one of the following scenes with Supergirl, like her first big action scene when they break out, I think that also was kind of very clearly CGI.
right.
Um, but to be honest, I've never really been somebody who really like critiques CGI in movies. And one of my biggest pet peeves about that is, especially when it's something like, oh, that's obviously CGI, and they're talking about like some big dragon or something, and it's like, well, obviously it's CGI. It's not practical, and it's not a big puppet, so because that would
Right.
look worse. So, I think you just have to like, um, what is that called when you
Willing suspension of disbelief.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, to me, the CGI stuff isn't really a big deal. I didn't really have an issue with that because I knew, and two, because like I said, coming into this movie, I feel like I've just heard so much information that I wish I was more surprised by during my actual screening. Like I feel like the week prior to the release of this movie, I feel like I was spoiled on so much. And if you looked at Twitter during like the right before this came out, people were posting like phone screen footage of all the cameos and all the everything that you could have been surprised by from this movie. It was on the internet already, which was annoying. um and obviously people are already sharing their opinions about that, so I guess in a way that kind of like braced me for what I was about to see. So I was like, okay, I know people are already talking about this like crappy CGI, so I'm just gonna have to put that aside and just like appreciate it for what it is. And like I said, as a fan, I really liked it. I mean, I personally liked getting to see Christopher Reeve and Helen Slater and even Nick Cage in his Superman
Yeah.
suit and everything. I thought that was really cool, actually.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah. No, I
you
agree. A lot of Flash's stuff did about like the Chronoball. That didn't bother me. The other worlds colliding, all that stuff. People are complaining about that. I didn't care because I understood what they were going for. And even the Supergirl stuff. I think it's just because we've had a couple of gritty, down to earth, street level Batman
know,
things. To see Batman look so CGI was weird. I'm like, okay, but he's not a flying alien. He's a human man. He can't fly or anything. So I'm like, well, he should look real because he's a man. He's not doing anything super fancy other than like ninja stuff. But so that's really like just clean up the Batman stuff, make that more realistic because that makes him more unique from the rest of the group. And I think I wouldn't have cared as much,
right.
me personally. So
I wonder if yeah, because that is a good point. And he's Batman, so it's like why are you
I mean, I know it
CGIing
can't
him
be
at
Michael
all?
Keaton,
Right.
but the way his suit is designed, I'm like, you can hide who's in there. It doesn't have to be Keaton posing so that it's his physique. So I'm like, no, there's a way to hide that. I grew up with the 89 version. So I'm like, right, I
Right.
know how that Batman's supposed to move and he's supposed to be even older. So I'm like, right, it's okay if he moves a little different. He can kind of be like, oh, I've forgotten his name from Daredevil, Matt Murdock's old blind trainer
Oh,
guy.
stick.
Yes, he could be like that, like that's what I was hoping for.
Right.
Yeah, that's all. Change that, and I'm like CGI. Oh, whatever. It's a movie. Like you say, it's a dragon. Of course, it's fake.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, there's a fine line there because obviously, if it's like crappy CGI to the point where it's like, okay, there was no effort put here. But
Yeah.
I don't really believe that for any point in this movie. Um, what are your overall thoughts on Keaton's Batman and just like his inclusion in this movie overall?
Um. I mean, I was happy to see him, but I also wonder, did we need him? Because lately, with all these team up movies, I feel like, well, why did you stick this person in here? Is it because you didn't think Flash could hold it up on his own? Like how I know Keaton was announced a while ago, not terribly terribly long, but a while ago. And I'm like, okay, did that happen because of the Ezra Miller in real life stuff? And they're like, we need something else to bring people in because they're not coming for as I don't know how much like I would love to do for someone to do a data study on every time someone gets canceled and they say, okay, we're going to boycott the movie. how much is that true versus they're just saying that, but their wallet says something different.
Mm,
Um, so I worry that he didn't really need to be here because I thought the strongest parts of the movie were the Flash parts, but I'm a Flash fan. And as much as I love Batman, I came here to see Flash. It was nice to have Batman, but I don't know if we needed him. I do like where they took him. The only thing I didn't like was the clear like look to camera and be like, remember this? Like the little laughing bag. Why is that here? Like he didn't have to say, you want to get nuts. I'm like, that has nothing to do with how he said it in the original movie. That was so much better. I'm like, you don't have to say it just because it's not like that's his expression.
right.
He said that one time to great effect in that movie, and so it needs context. It's not like his call sign or something.
No, no, I agree. I think that came across as like pure fan service,
Yeah.
almost over the line. I would say over the line,
Yeah. But I
Um,
like how at first he was like, oh, I don't do that anymore. And he has to like, you know, Barry has to melt his heart a little bit, and he reluctantly was like, oh, all right, I guess I'll put the suit, like I like that it takes him a little time to come back, and then he realized like, oh, this is worth it. So I do think his evolution was good. So
right.
yeah, so that's my feeling on Keaton specifically. So
Yeah, I agree with you. I do wonder, because we're talking about like the Flash's origin, but I wonder if this movie would have been received differently if it was more of like a solo Flash movie
right.
versus a team up movie. But then again, there is the whole Ezra Miller of it all. So it's like, okay, are we using these other characters to distract from that? Um, but Michael Keaton, it's he was like you said, he was announced a while ago, but he was also set to be like the ongoing Batman going forward because he played Batman in the Batgirl movie that we're never going to see. But that was kind of the idea because I guess as it's going around now, it's been kind of publicized that there's several alternate endings that they shot for this movie, and for a while, I guess it was going to be that Michael Keaton and Sasha Kaye, Supergirl, return at the very end of the movie, and they meet Barry at the courthouse, and it's instead of George Clooney, we get Michael Keaton, and that's the ongoing Batman. And then I guess Batfleck was gonna be like lost somewhere, and Barry had to find him or something. But I think they fully intended to go forward with Michael Keaton into the rest of whatever they had planned. Um, so that's just interesting to think about now because it's like, yeah, are they trying to distract from Ezra Miller? But they also had a plan with Batman too. It wasn't just like this one-off solo movie. So um, yeah, I mean, I enjoyed him, but I agree. I wonder if maybe this movie would have been stronger with if it were more of a Flash movie because I think about like the other characters that are supposed to be like supporting Flash characters like Iris West. I mean, she was in this movie barely. Um and I feel like they just kind of like squeezed her in where they could. Um and I feel like she kind of deserved a bigger part. And I feel similarly with the way I feel about Keaton with the Supergirl character here. Like I loved her. I really thought she did a great job, um but I think they took up some kind of like valuable screen time slash character development time. So yeah, it's just I'm not sure how to feel about it. Again, I'm still like processing my thoughts about it. I want to see it
Right.
again because I'm like,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, I liked her too. I did not think I was going to. I'm not a huge super anybody fan, but I do like Man of Steel. But but Superman, the concept, my whole life, I'm like, oh yeah, watch him. But I'm like, he always feels a little bland to me. But So I didn't have strong feelings either way, but as the movie unfolded, I was like, oh, I really like her. But I agree. And I don't know if it's because they bring Zod back and I feel like that whole thing brings it down. But I was like, okay, this is an Elseworld story. So I'm like, what is the real problem? Is the real problem not that he needs an assist? Is it because they're like, well, we have to raise the stakes so that he can learn? I can't just change things because of look at all the other people I affect. That's the lesson he's supposed to learn. So you
Mhm.
have to bring in people. It's just a shame because Wonder Woman's movie doesn't have that, and Aquaman. I mean, Aquaman. I don't remember Aquaman ever being this giant character that is beloved by people. I thought he was one of the C or D list
Right.
characters, but before his movie came out, and that did so much for the Aquaman brand. So I wish this could be in that same vein where it's like, no, it's his movie, and maybe we have Reverse Flash, or we have Grodd, or we have Captain Cold, somebody else, and his support, like you say, like Iris,
Mhm.
maybe more Star Lab, something or other. I don't know, just but it's okay. The more trailers I saw, I was like, I don't think we're gonna meet any other. I didn't even know Iris was gonna be in this.
Mhm.
Um, Now, what I do like that they did, you know how he invites her back to his place and he gets her a beer and all this stuff. That could have been a meet cute and he's falling for it, but I like that he's so obsessed with saving his parents that he's like, that's it. All I have to do is this. So I thought it was refreshing that it isn't just I see a girl, I fall in love with a girl at the end, and now she's in danger and I have to save her. It's nice that she's not really the inciting incident or the MacGuffin that he has to fix. I'm glad they kept it parent focus.
Yeah.
But it's nice that she keeps clawing around away, like, "Hey, I'm still here. If you want to talk, I think we could something." I thought that was a nice change for the genre, you know. So I was happy to see her too.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think yeah, I'm glad they didn't go like the in like a rom-commy kind of route with it. I what you were talking about earlier did remind me that this movie, while it's not like while it's not super like a one for one adaptation, they are in a way like adapting the Flashpoint story, which has
Kind of.
Batman, and it has a super person. It's but that's in that story, in the comic story, it's Thomas Wayne, and here we're getting old Bruce Wayne. And then the same thing with in the comics, it's Superman, which they pretty much kind of they just gave that same role to Supergirl here, which I didn't mind. I actually thought that was pretty interesting. Um, because I do like the idea of what would happen if Superman got into the wrong hands, and what if there was another power that was utilizing that character. So I liked getting to at least see like a live action version of that
Yeah.
here.
Mm-hmm.
um but but yeah, it's and I know Andy Muschietti, he kind of made it a point, I guess while they were doing press, he was talking about, well, while there's so many people familiar with that storyline, they didn't want to adapt the same comic book story, which I can see too. I appreciate that this is a little more fresh in that way. um
I agree. Flashpoint's a great comic. If you haven't read it and you kind of like comics even a little bit, I would recommend it. So, um,
how did we feel about Ezra Miller's performance?
very happy. Now, I do think we should talk about this. It might be an elephant in the room. This is a personal choice with each person. You either can separate the art and the artist, and or you have to do something else to reconcile your feelings about it. Um, I really thought when I discovered that there was going to be two of them, I was like, oh no, that might be bad because now it's double. But I actually thought that was so well done. I've seen a lot of Parent Trap adaptations. So I was like, oh no, not this again. But that it did feel nice because they weren't in agreement at all times. And then the big reveal at the end and I wondered I knew it was a variant. I was like, that's a variant of Barry. But I thought it was a different one. I didn't realize it was the one he created here even later. That was I didn't see that coming.
Mm-hmm.
Um, So even the three of them there at the end, I to me that was the gravitas. So I thought they brought nice humor to this, like when Barry doesn't realize that his power has transferred to the other Barry and he runs.
Into the
He
wall.
runs.
Yeah, yeah.
I just thought that was so great. So I was actually very, very happy. And I believed him. Everything with his mom, that felt very sincere, very, like it didn't feel saccharine, like it was just, I'm very impressed with him. So I can separate him from whatever's going on in real life. Because I'm like, right, I'm not looking at Ezra Miller, I'm looking at the Flash, I'm looking at Barry Allen. That I know how to do that. But if you're a person who can't do that, if you're like, no, I can't support this film because then I'm condoning what he does, I respect that. So,
Yeah.
it's personal choice with each person. So,
Yeah, totally. I agree. I think some of that is warranted, and I think that is why, the movie is being received the way it is, I guess, which I understand, but yeah, I agree with you. The within the film itself, I thought Ezra Miller did a great job, especially having to play opposite themselves. And it wasn't just like Barry. They were very different characters themselves. One was so much more experienced, and you saw that the tragedy in the delivery too. You felt that this Barry had lost his mother, and then you could see that this other guy hadn't experienced any of that. So I
right.
agree. I thought that was really well done.
I apologize. I'm still learning the pronoun thing. I just said he, him, and all that throughout that whole description. I apologize. I know they do go by they, them, right?
Right,
Apologies. So
right,
I respect pronouns, so don't at me at the comments. I'm still learning. I'm working on it.
right. Yeah, when we talk about Barry, we can say he, him.
Sure, but I was
Yeah,
I was talking about the performance, and I meant to say they. I apologize. I do want to be respectful of, if that's what we want to be called, then I respect that. So apologies. I just now realized I'm like, oh, I didn't say. I kept saying I believed him.
mm,
Sorry. I just want to be clear that I'm aware that I just did that. So all
right.
right, there we go. Go
uh,
ahead and put that out there. I feel better now that I said that.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I agree, and I thought that they, you know, like you said, they contributed to a lot of the comedy in this movie. Yeah, the running scene. I liked the baby shower stuff. But I just knew that people were gonna take that whole scene the wrong way, and that was gonna give people more fuel. So that's unfortunate, I guess. But yeah, as a performance, as an actor, Ezra Miller was incredible, and just the whole emotional beats with his mom, and just I will say that after the end of the movie, I was expecting them to at least acknowledge what actually happened to his mom. But they didn't
Yeah.
they didn't really touch on that at all, which caught me by surprise.
Yeah. That's a good point. And I'm trying to remember because I feel like DC is much more guilty of retconning things. I'm like, I don't know if there is a definitive this is the origin, or if it's like, no, no, like the New 52 did this and da 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 did that. And I'm like, oh yeah, I don't know if we have like an official, like this is the canon. Do we? I can't
I'm
recall.
I mean, I think the more well known, I think I think it's Reverse Flash who ends up killing Barry's mom, and it's part of this whole like loop thing where
Right.
he has to kill Barry's mom in order for Barry to become the Flash. And because Barry becomes the Flash, that's how Reverse Flash becomes Reverse Flash, because he's inspired by Flash. So it's like,
It's the
which it's
paradox.
that
Yeah.
it's the whole paradox thing. So
Yeah. Okay. That's the version I know, but I'm like, I don't think that's the only version. I think there's a couple other. This is the downside to DC. They don't like to stay married to really anything except for maybe the Waynes dying, but
right,
but even that's questionable.
right.
So yeah, but that's a good point.
It
I
just caught me by surprise because I
yeah.
was I was thinking, as like a normie, right? As somebody who didn't know, who doesn't know that who killed Barry's mom. I thought that that would, be one of the things that people were going to talk about afterward. It's like, well, they didn't tell us what happened actually, so I thought that was weird. I did hear that, if they were to make a sequel, which I don't know if, who knows what they're going to do. Um, but I guess that was the plan, to kind of explore that in a sequel. But personally, I did feel like that was kind of missing. I thought that that I it just felt incomplete without that.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a good
and then
point.
also and then also too, I was because at the very end, that's when Barry too kind of learns that um the whole Batman and Supergirl dying was like a fixed point in time, and he can't ever change it no matter how hard he tries. But then I was thinking about that, and I was like, okay, so they end up dying, but that's not the only thing that happens in that timeline. They end up dying because Zod and his army are killing them. But then, so if Zod wins, then that means, he gets the codex or whatever out of Supergirl. Um, and Batman's not there to stop him, and the Flash is trying to prevent the whole thing. So I just started thinking about that timeline, and it's like, okay, so does Zod end up just kind of getting what he wants, and does he end up terraforming everything? And it's like, I just feel like that was another, like, that was something that they kind of like dropped as well. I felt like there was more, at least to acknowledge, what
Yeah.
happens afterward, because that, at the end of the day, that is Barry one or Barry two's like home. So, and that is where his mom is too, which Barry one cares so much about. So, so I mean, I think it's implied that that whole universe, or at least the Earth, um, is under Zod's rule.
Right. Right. They could acknowledge that because it's okay to have worlds where there are no heroes or they lost or whatever, because that would be more realistic. If you're going to do the whole there's Earth 1083, some of them, the bad guys are just going to have to win, statistically. So you're right. They
Right.
should acknowledge it. Running out
Yeah.
of time. I guess we should pop out and pop back in.
Okay.
Be right back. Ready? Yeah, so I'm thinking about that. I'm like, oh, I've only seen this movie once too. I'm like, you're right. There are a lot of threads just kind of dangling there.
Right.
And I wonder if it's because you're too busy being distracted by, okay, here's another problem. Barry learns his lesson, but he also doesn't, because he should know better. Like, put the can back like you never touched it and then go away. But no, first he talks to mom and like, hey, what happened to the whole don't disturb a single blade of grass? And then he moved the can so his dad would be on camera. So the ending should not have been a surprise. Now I was surprised about the who because I was not spoiled at all. So I think my brain went there, and so I didn't have time to go, wait a minute. So in that universe, this happened. Oh, wait a minute. We don't get closure on the mom. You're right. These are excellent points.
Mhm.
So yeah, good job.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing with this, like, all the whole multiverse, there's so much of it that doesn't make any sense. I felt the same way about Spider-Man No Way Home. I didn't understand why all of these villains were coming, like, back to life. Like, I still don't understand what they were doing there in the first place, because I think they were trying to get across that this was like moments before they died or something, and the Peters had to save them, before that happened. But um here, I didn't understand. I mean, I did like, Bruce's kind of explanation of the multiverse. I thought like
Yes,
visually that
beginning.
was really interesting. Um, but I didn't understand why Barry going back in time to save his mom, because if we're gonna Barry going back in time, even to replace the cans of tomatoes onto the top shelf, that world's Bruce Wayne should have already been born. So I don't understand what the
Yeah,
change would have been there for
right.
that Bruce to be recast as George Clooney.
Right.
Um, so I mean, once you get really down to it, I think there is a lot of things that you can pick and
Yes.
you know,
It's hard to untangle. The only movie that I think that has done this right is Everything Everywhere All at Once. Once that movie came out, everyone else that had a multiverse story, they all should have been like, never mind, we're shelving this because that's the way to do it.
yeah,
It is. It's a lot of, do you want to go down that spiral and really tease it? It's like, because kind of like you said, okay, it's a dragon, it's supposed to be fake. It's like, right, multiverse. They can make up whatever rules they want. You're right. Like you can get stuck in a logic battle in your own mind. I certainly
right,
have.
right,
I agree. The only thing I can think of, I don't know why it was George Clooney. I mean, other than it was funny. You knew
yeah,
it wasn't going to be Val Kilmer because
right,
his health. But I thought it was going to be whoever the next Batman is. I was like, oh, this is the thing that you were trying to avoid. It's like maybe it'll be Robert Pattinson, or maybe it'll be whoever James Gunn has handpicked. Maybe this is their intro, like how Tom Holland was introduced in Civil War. I thought it was going to be something like that. So when it was George Clooney, I was like, okay, that's a choice. Maybe it's for a laugh, kind of like how Doctor Strange 2 ends with the guy from Evil Dead going, oh, it's over. I was like, maybe it's just a but a bump.
yeah.
Like,
I mean, I think so. I think that because it's after every time I see one of these movies, I always go to the internet and I want to see what everybody else is saying, right? So I had started watching all these other kind of like breakdown videos and stuff, and there was somebody was talking, they were kind of treating that cameo as like, okay, well, this is who James Gunn has chosen going forward. Um, and I guess a part of me could see that, but I don't think that is the plan. Because but they are, they have announced that they're doing like a Batman Brave and the Bold, where it's going to focus on Batman and his son Damian, and I guess they're going to include a lot of the Bat family. So I think we do need to expect like an older Batman. I don't know if it's going to be George Clooney, but I think that was just done for laughs because before they filmed that, it was Michael Keaton and Sasha Kaye, and I guess they also filmed another scene where it was them, and then it was also Henry Cavill showed up and Gal Gadot showed up. So it's just
they got us on
knowing
our
all that.
toes.
Yeah, which one are they going to use?
Yeah. They have commitment
Um,
issues. So even if they say they've made up their mind, they haven't, because something will happen and they'll have to change their mind. Now, to be fair, as much as we're all hating on Warner Brothers these days, not all of it is their fault. They have problematic actors doing things. And so how do you do your damage control? This is a great history lesson for anyone whose job it is to, fix PR nightmares. Like people years from now will study this going, see this? Don't do that.
right.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not worried about the future because it's changed so much. I mean, back when this movie was announced, we were also supposed to get a Green Lantern movie, not even being talked about anymore. So I'm like, yeah, you know what? They can talk about all that stuff, but I can't even focus on that right now because until we have like a trailer and a release date, it's not going to feel real anyway. So,
Yeah, I mean
um,
we've been duped so many times. I mean, as
yes,
like a DC fan, they were like you said, there was a
yeah.
Green Lantern movie. There was a Cyborg movie at one point. There was a Teen Titans movie, or I think there was a Nightwing movie at some point. No, not anymore.
They want to be Marvel so bad, but not even Marvel is, and that's the other thing. I wonder how would this movie have done if it had come out even just a couple years ago, if it had beaten at least Doctor Strange 2, or if COVID didn't happen. So maybe if we gotten it like in 2020, I just wonder how different it all would be. Because I've lost track of the timeline of when Ezra did things. I think the Iceland thing was first. but I don't remember when that was. So if that hadn't happened yet, I don't know. I
I
don't
don't
know.
either.
I don't really keep track because again, I separate the art from the art. I don't. It's not that I don't care. If you're doing something to people, you need to pay your penance for that. But in terms of critiquing the art in front of us, I don't want to include that me personally. So I don't know. It's a shame. Uh, but the more I think about this movie, the more I think it's a real shame that what is strongest is the purely flash things. And so the cameos are a little bit of a distraction and all this, oh, we're going over here. And to your point of, look, it's George Clooney instead of, well, what happened to mom? That is the better
Mhm.
question instead of who's getting out of that limousine or whatever it was. I forget the car, but you know what I mean? Like
Right.
that, I think that's where the movie should be. So
Because it does, you're right. Like it does feel like, if they're gonna, if this was, their opportunity to set up, what's gonna come next, that would have been a great opportunity to show us the next Batman. And I think somebody said the same thing, about like the Christopher Reeve cameo. They were like, well, I thought we were gonna see like our new Superman here, which I mean, I guess that would have been cool, but I personally like what we got. Do you see any of this carrying over into like the new DCU future that James Gunn is
I don't
going to be
know.
spearheading?
I'm not closely following every little tweet that he puts out there, but I'm confused about where James Gunn's mind is. I don't know if he's all like, you handed me this stuff and I think it's crap, so I'm trying to distance myself. Or if he's like, is there a way to organically exit all this and then we start anew? Like, just forget all that. I'm not sure where his heart is. Like, I don't know if he's, I like to think he cares. I like to think that he is a fan of the source material, so it'd be nice if he just didn't shit on everything, but I don't know for sure if that's what he's doing or not. There's nothing wrong with changing directions because there's been so many problems with this exact group. I just don't know why you would move forward and not release Batgirl, but release this. And now we're also getting Aquaman. Like it just feels like you've taken a lot of the wind out of the sails.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a fan, you should have let that wrapped up first and then say, don't worry about it. Let's handle this and then you'll see. Stay tuned. Like he should have been teasing us,
Right.
like all tease and no delivery, like that's what he should be doing to make you hungry, like maybe something will happen in these movies, even if it's the post-credits scene. Um so I don't know. I'm confused about where he is because I think the message is lost. Now, I'm
Yeah.
not looking that hard either, to be fair. So I don't know. You seem to be paying more attention. Where do you think James Gunn is hoping to go or trying to do anything?
I mean, I think that this movie, somewhat makes a case for, like the DCEU characters to stick around somewhat, or, at least they have their own universe to occupy, while, maybe we'll be seeing James Gunn's universe in a different world. But then it's like, well, who's going to be the Flash of that universe, and is it just one Flash, or is there gonna are we gonna have like another Grant Gustin, Ezra Miller situation? Um, I and also they've announced that they're doing the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, and there's a lot of question about whether or not Sasha Kaya is going to be playing Supergirl. But then you're like, well, isn't Sasha Kaya's Supergirl Henry Cavill's cousin? But then, but then you're like, well, she comes from Michael Keaton's Batman's world. So is that Superman Henry Cavill, or is it a different actor? So I don't
Right,
know.
right. It's messy. It's getting messy quick. That's the reason. Like, if it were me, let's pretend I'm James Gunn for just a minute, and I got hired and I could take over, and they say, right, oh, here's what's going on with this actor and that actor, and they're choosing not to move forward because I don't even know where they stand. Like, if they said we're doing Wonder Woman 3 as long as Gal says yes, would she? would she say yes, or is she like, you know what, I did that and I think it's time to step away because Wonder Woman 2 or 1984 was not kind to me, so I'm out. I don't know where they all stand, but let's pretend they all want out. Then I would spin off kind of like what they're doing. It's like, okay, you have Blue Beetle coming out. We've had nothing to hint to that so far. That could be a stepping off point. Do that, do Green Lantern, like do a whole other team, kind of like how in the MCU he was over here with the Guardians. And for the longest time, other than the Thanos tie-in, had nothing to do with Iron Man and Captain America and Thor. Maybe do the same thing. Like, right, see these characters that no one's ever heard of? I'm gonna do what for Blue Beetle, what I did for Guardians, or something like that.
Right.
Maybe it's time to take a break from the A team, you know, because we have so many Batman. Like, why do the Zack Snyder stuff and then green light the Matt Reeves stuff? Because now everyone's like, wait a minute, we have all these Batman. What's going on? Maybe step away. I love Batman, but maybe we should step away just long enough so people can have a palate cleanser and go, oh, I get it now. Now we're somewhere new. Like, it make it clear because you took a 5, 6, 7 year break from what we're familiar with, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it sucks because there's like the character and the comic booky stuff, but there's also like, the real world people that are involved in making these decisions and that are, being cast in these movies. So, like you said earlier, you pointed out, that you really like Man of Steel, and I think since that movie has come out, I've been, somewhat vocal about, I've had as a Superman fan, I didn't love that movie. And I think, in terms of Superman as a character, they got a lot of things wrong. And a lot of his supporting cast was almost unrecognizable. And, but having said that, I've really come to like Henry Cavill as Superman. So, I started to get on board with the whole Zack Snyder DCEU, and I really loved Wonder Woman, and I love Gal Gadot as the character, and I think Jason Momoa has really kind of like embodied that character and made that character its own and kind of reinvented it in a way. So it is bittersweet to if this is kind of the last time we're ever going to see them. It does kind of suck because I think a lot of what they were trying to do really worked out. So it is kind of exhausting, as a fan who just wants to see these characters be done right and be, done justice. That they keep dropping the ball over and over and over again. So I'm very excited to see James Gunn's take on Superman, and I've come to terms with the fact that it's going to be a brand new cast and everything. So, I'm looking forward to that, the future of the DCU, and I hope that all this residual hate and just all the drama that comes with it doesn't carry over into this new era. Um, but having said that, I will miss a lot of the elements of what we've been given so far because I think they were moving toward a somewhat competitive kind of thing for Marvel and the MCU, but again, there was a whole drama with Zack Snyder and the way that whole thing was handled and Joss Whedon and everything. So I think it's really hard for them to continue because of all of that stuff. So I get it. Um, but I wouldn't be surprised 10 years down the line if we end up seeing all of them again in another multiverse, whatever. Um, I want to see this movie again. I need to I need to reevaluate everything I think about this movie and just but that's the thing, like I think that I really enjoyed this movie as like, because we've been comparing it to like Spider-Man, and I do think it is more so like a Spider-Man 2 or like a really good like classic superhero movie versus like something that you would see now in the MCU.
Mhm.
Um and I think that even though it is like a multiverse story, I think the Flash as a character is what is why we are getting that in the first place. So I I just really want them to do right by these characters and these stories. So I'm very optimistic about the future of DC, and I hope they get their shit together. And I hope James Gunn is the answer. Um, but we'll see.
That's beautiful. It breaks my heart. I didn't mean to be like, oh yeah, man, it's really great. I don't think that's the definitive version of the character. I just
A
thought,
lot of
oh, if
people
you're
love
gonna
that
take him
movie.
somewhere different, thank you for at least being technically, competent and all that stuff. Like,
Right, right.
um, I agree. And here's the thing: everyone likes to crap all over DC, but they have had real bright spots. If it was all garbage, no one would take the time that we're taking even now to talk about all this stuff. So because it's possible and they have done it, we just expect them to do it every time. It's like, come on, we demand excellence. If you're going to do this, do it the right way. If it's not that it doesn't be perfect. I don't like that word. But if it's not what you know it can be, then you shouldn't put it forward. Like make sure it's the best version of whatever it is you're trying to do as possible. That's really what the fans want. If it's made with real love, like if you can tell a fan made it, you know, then the fans will, they will come. Yeah, like I agree. I don't think it's hopeless. And a good example is when the Batman came out last year. Like when they announced it was coming, and we even had a trailer. I was like, do we need another Batman movie? When I'm obsessed with it, I saw it like 20 times.
Yeah.
They proved me wrong. I'm like, right, you just have to make it in a way that it speaks to a certain branch of fans of whatever the property is. Just do it right so that someone goes, I recognize that. That is a version of the character that I'm on board with. So there's no such thing as too much Batman. But I was getting a little Batman fatigue. I was like, I don't know. We just had a lot of Batman. Like, let's give some other characters some love. But it was just done so well. So same thing here. I am pleasantly surprised. I'm just so very happy. I think Flash, the character, is the strongest part of the Flash movie. I don't think, oh, go this for Batman. Speaking as a Batman super fan,
Mhm.
yeah, it's nice that he's there, but we don't need him. I really do think that this is Barry's story. It's not an origin story in the traditional sense of the word, but it gives you what you need if you're new to the character. I did take my family, and they're all like, "Who's the Flash?" They were not confused. I mean, they were confused about phasing, but I think that's all. They were like, "That doesn't make sense." I'm like, "Right, this is like comic book gobbledygook." Okay. um, so yeah, just trust your source material. Like, don't think you have to drop these people in to sell. But I understand Flashpoint does deal with a group because the whole point is you got to show how Barry's actions are selfish, and he's got to think beyond his own needs. So I understand why they're there. It's just a shame we couldn't have done a story that was a little smaller and more Flash focused.
Mhm.
But what they did give us was good, and I do think he was the best part. Everything that had to do with him. So yeah.
Yeah.
They're going to be okay. Like they'll have duds in the future, but I don't think they'll all be duds. I think they'll have some winners in there too.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think Batman is a great example. That Batman is a great example of that. Um, and yeah, exactly. I hope it is more of that going forward versus you know we get this new Superman movie and people are just gonna go in already hating the movie and then creating this narrative around it
Mm-hmm.
because it is DC, because it is attached to DC, even though it's a whole new thing. I just fear that people won't be able to let go. Uh, so yeah, I hope it is another situation where it's like the Batman, where it's a total reinvention and people recognize these characters for what they always were, not what WB or DC or all the drama has
Right.
manifested.
Right. Isn't James Gunn a mega Superman fan too?
Yeah, I guess.
Because I think I read that. If I'm remembering this correctly, then I agree with you. I'm not worried about that movie because that does seem to be a passion project. If I'm understanding the narrative correctly,
Mhm.
so if he has passion for it, I think it's in good hands. So How does he feel about this movie and Aquaman? I don't know, Aquaman 2 specifically. I don't know. I don't know if that hung it up, or if like what you said, the delays and then the background stuff and then all the changes. I mean, it's funny, pre-COVID and post-COVID, us on every level, it's amazing how different we all are on so many levels that it permeates every part of life. So it's like, oh man, this movie just didn't stand a chance with a certain populace, right?
Right.
Um, so I don't know. If you're judging this movie without watching it, shame on you. I say go watch it because I was skeptical. I went with rock bottom. I was like, this is gonna suck. I'm like that meme with the board, like, change my mind. Well, they did. They
Yeah.
changed my mind. It does not suck. There are moments that I think are a little cringy, but they're few and far apart. So, um, yeah, you're either on board with the baby shower or you're not. I don't think there's a gray zone with that particular sequence. Um, I do worry that the movie starts with it because it does set up like, is this what the movie is? And then it doesn't really
Yeah.
do, it doesn't get stay that goofy. So
Right.
tonally it's a little weird too. Um,
But that's true.
yeah.
Again, I think that opening sequence was, it felt, baby shower or not, I'm more so talking about the whole interaction with, the Flash and Alfred and Batman and then
Yes.
Wonder Woman showing up and everything. It felt very classic DC, like it felt
Yes.
very comic booky, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what I want to see in my DC
Yes.
movies. So, um, yeah, so I appreciated that for what it was, and I hope we get more of that going forward.
Yeah.
With, yeah,
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I feel like I'm missing some big piece of this movie that we haven't talked about yet. I'm like, we covered everything. Baby shower, CGI, cameos. Oh well, I guess it's a smaller thing when all the worlds are colliding and they're doing a brief like, here's George Reeves and here's Nicolas Cage. You know, for those diehard fans who know about the thing that could have been, and I didn't mind those because I definitely felt like, oh yeah, here's Now they didn't do anything with it. They kind of just showed up to look at everything and then go away. But I felt like the whole point was just to show it keeps going and going, and there's so many variants. I feel like that was just them explaining their version of variants. So it didn't bother me at all. And I was fine with what they picked. How do you feel about the multiple worlds, like what was chosen versus what they didn't choose? Because it's not like it was all Superman either. They had Jay Garrick in there.
mm-hmm.
So thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, would it have been nice to see Grant Gustin?
Yes.
Sure. Sure. Like I understand, what people were talking about there. But like I said, I appreciate it. I mean, I very much took it as like, a celebration of DC, kind of just honoring everything that's come before this movie. Well, I guess not everything, but kind of the idea that George Reeves, it started on TV, and then this, Superman the movie, and so I liked it, and I also think that they included a lot of that to kind of establish, like I was saying earlier, that if there were ever a reason, we can always come back to this universe, like the DCEU. So not only are all these cameos their own worlds, but the Flash movie is also set in its own universe. So I think that was somewhat of an effort to be like, okay, well, we might not be continuing with this, but it's still gonna be here. You might see one of these scenes in a future movie, in a future Flash movie, where we see Ezra Miller in one of these weird CGI worlds.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's very messy, and to be fair, I think DC Comics, um, especially when dealing with the multiverse, is very messy too. And I've already said that I'm not really a fan of these multiverse events because it gets too confusing, and people, even for me, it's just hard. It's hard to grasp, and it's not the best types of stories that you can tell with these characters. So I just think that they were trying to kind of get across that it's just another DC world in the vast multiverse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to you, because I agree, Crisis on Infinity Earth, very hard to even read.
Mhm.
Do you think like there's a lot of people who don't know about the drama, they just go and watch movies and that's it, they don't read reviews, they don't follow entertainment news, nothing. Do you think having movies like this creates a real disconnect and they're like, I just don't understand this, so I guess I'm done with this whole thing because it's getting too cerebral for me? um like maybe we should step away from multiverse stories. um just talk about the masses here, like just the normies, right?
Personally, I think yes. I very much prefer, like you said, I wish I kind of a big part of me kind of wishes this was more of like a solo Flash movie. Um, the same that they've done with the previous characters. But I also think too, I kind of understand again from like from a real life perspective and from you know with a history of previous DC films. I mean, Michael Keaton's not going to be alive forever, so you want to get him in your multiverse movie when you can, right? so
Right, right.
so I understand that too. But yeah, like I said, I think there's so much more to say. um yeah.
So maybe it was okay to do this once just to have that back door of like, now we're going to move in a different way. This movie was to explain we're stepping away, but understand that we could come back. Like after Aquaman 2, maybe we don't see Jason Momoa for a little bit, but if he came back later, this is help planting the seed of explaining how that could even happen. You think maybe this is just to be connective tissue, for people later,
I
maybe?
think so. I think it's an effort. I don't know if people are going to catch on or if they're even going to remember any of this in 5 years.
Right,
But again, like as a comic book person, as a person who watches this stuff all the time, it's like I get it. I understand what they're going for.
right.
Uh,
Well, I
yeah,
guess my question is, how well do you think they executed that? Do you think, oh, only comic book people are gonna be like, I see you? Or do you think, no, they actually did a pretty good job that the next level down would get it to? Or you're like, no, no, I got it, but if I wasn't a comic person, boy, did they botch it because I would be so lost. Like,
I think another big thing too is that they were also expecting this movie to you know do a lot financially better than it is doing currently. So I think maybe they were expecting to make a sequel to this, and now maybe that's not looking so good. So I think a lot of it is writing on like, okay, how do people feel about this, and then where do we want to go from there. um
right,
so I don't know if it was a good or bad job either way. I think that, like I said, I think they made the effort, and it is what it is on the screen. And I just don't. I just think that the whole multiverse stuff it's just too convoluted, and I think personally I would like to see more grounded. It doesn't have to be grounded because all these characters are so much bigger than that. But I think it's a lot to ask for the general audiences to
right,
accept, and
right,
especially when there's the word of mouth is becoming, it just overtakes the quality of the movie. I think
mm-hmm.
people just look beyond that either way.
Right. So I guess to wrap this up, moving forward, do you hope we have a sequel? And if we do, is there anything you would change? Like, oh, okay, maybe there's a way to move forward and we don't have Ezra, just in case that's what's really breaking the camel's back here, like, or what, maybe something else we haven't even touched on yet. Like, what would you like to see happen next, if anything, that has to do with Flash?
You know what? I actually have not thought about that
I'm
because
kidding. You don't have to answer that right now. I mean,
well, it is a good question. I'm just like, oh, I'm so unprepared for that. I mean, it is, I don't know, to be honest, because I don't, if I were to say right now, I feel like it's unlikely that they're going to make another film starring Ezra Miller as the lead. So I mean, anything can happen, but part of me is like, I like this movie for what it is. I like it for what it's trying to say. Um, and I guess, if this is like the final thing we see of the DC, obviously we're getting Aquaman and everything, but I guess I've kind of like, you know, talked myself through it, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm ready to move on, because that is kind
Mhm.
of like a theme in this movie too. So, but yeah, like I said, I think there were a couple of threads, kind of dangling. Like um, they talked about in a sequel that they wanted to explore the Reverse Flash killing Barry's mother and everything. So I guess that is something that I would like to see because I felt like that was missing from this first one. Um, if we're talking about just like a sequel to the Flash movie, I would love to see some of Flash's rogues, his old rogues gallery, and I mean the Flash has a great supporting cast and stories of his own. So I personally I would like to see more of like a more definitive solo Flash movie dealing with in Central City. And maybe we get a quick cameo from the Justice League or whatever, but I would like to see more of like a 2017 Wonder Woman version of the Flash.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think Flash is a great character. If you're not familiar with him, I recommend. It would be nice to have a sequel, but since we are so oversaturated, I'm actually really feeling. I've been feeling it ever since Moon Knight came out. So I'm like, okay, I'm okay with them. Like, slow down. Don't run, Barry. Don't run. Slow down. um,
I love that line, by the way. You just reminded me where after he's running, I'm
yeah.
slow.
Yes. Yes.
I thought he was
Slow
gonna say I
down.
lost my powers, but he said I'm slow, and I was like,
Yeah,
that's even
that's
better.
great. See, there's great little nuggets in there. There really is.
Yeah,
Um,
and also
yeah,
the like
so
the Back to the Future, just the whole Eric Stoltz and
yeah,
I
yeah.
thought
It
that
does
was really
make you
well
want
done.
spin-off series like, oh, if you're gonna spin this off, let's see that movie.
Right.
So much we can tease out here. We could go on forever. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's not simple. It isn't just it's great, go see it, or it sucks, you can skip. Clearly, from this long conversation, we can go on and on and on about it. There is a lot to say. I do think it's fair to give it a chance. I would. I really truly would.
Me
If
too.
you're a DC fan, you probably have seen it because you're just chomping at the bit to have your own opinion. So I just encourage that. It's complicated. Your feelings about all of it's complicated, but that certainly makes more interesting. It's not just like you just consume it and then it's disposable and you forget it the next day. I would prefer this. So what we're
Hmm.
doing right now over just
Yeah.
what I saw a thing. No, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Um, I got deep. Any other
Yeah.
last thoughts you want to give before we wrap it up?
I don't know. Like you're right. I mean, this has been like it. I feel exhausted after talking about
Oh,
this.
no, I killed him. I killed Kyle.
Not because it like the conversation has gone so long, but just because there's so much to say and there's so much to feel and to think about. It's just very like mentally exhausting. Watching it is a different story because I
Yes.
think it is very enjoyable, and if you're not like if you put aside all of your concerns and just go in, um, hoping to see a good superhero movie, I personally think you'll get that.
I agree. Be like Kyle. Go in with that with no drama, and then when you're done, listen to the soundtrack. He has so much good advice for you. So if you're not listening to Kyle by now, I don't know what you're doing with your life. So
Thank you.
those are our thoughts. So we're gonna wrap it up. We'll be back. I'm not sure with what. So stay tuned. I guess that's it. So
Yeah.
bye.
Bye, guys.